if I come here, okay. So now, of course, if I press space again, I actually want it to just finish immediately, like in most dialogues. Welcome back to Arcade. I am Super Tommy, and this is part 3 of our item shop series in Phaser 3.50. So this is a Zelda-like item shop where you can walk up to the items that you can see and then select them depending on which item you're facing when you press space to then decide to buy it. So in the last video, part 2, we added this dialog that comes up. So let's just go over here and just cancel that with N. And we say, I want this piece of meat, 500 coins, should I buy it or not? That's what this dialog is. So in this video, we're gonna add a typewriter effect and add some animation for when our dialog and opens, like you just saw, it came in instantly. We're gonna do a tween to open that and a tween to close it. And then like we mentioned in the last video, we're gonna abstract these open and close logic into its own component to leverage our component based system here. So first thing, let's actually go to blog.arcade.co because we have a typewriter effect article. So here's all our various articles. Let's go to, let's see, view more posts, and let's just search for our typewriter text effect. Let's go over here. So we've got, of course, all kinds of things here. If you haven't been to the blog, definitely give that a try. So here's our typewriter effect for regular text and for bitmap text, but today we're going to do just regular text. The logic is roughly the same. You can check out this article for more information specifically. We're really just going to steal this method right here. We're going to steal this method, just copy it, and then I'll show you how to take this and use it in our project here. So let me just make myself smaller. Let's go here. So let's just add a method here, typewrite text. So the incoming thing is going to be a string, and we need, so time is on the scene, so we need a reference to our scene. We can get that from our game object. So instead of this.time, it's going to be scene.time. And then we don't have a label. Our thing is called text. Now let's see, is that correct? That looks about right. So let's just explain to you what's happening here. So when we call typewrite text, we pass in a string we want to typewrite out to a text field. And so we get the total length of that text, and then we add a event that gets called until we have no more characters in our string left, and we call that every 200 milliseconds. That's what we do. We basically break out our string to individual characters, and we show one of those characters each time, every 200 milliseconds using the phaser clock add event. So that's this add event method here. Now to use it, we can go here, and instead of doing this.text, we can do this.typewrite text. We pass that in, let's just comment that out, and you should see that it'll go. Now let's go back to our game here. Aha, right, so we had some text to start. And so it is typewriting it, but we also wanted to clear out the existing text, right? So let's come here. So we want this.text. Text. Let's do that. Now let's see how that goes. That works. If I press no, and I hit again, and look at that, what's going on. So what's happening here is actually we never cancel this add event. So this is going to repeat length minus 1 time. So it does the first character and then repeats length minus 1 times. But because we don't end this here every time we call typewrite text, what's going to happen is, like we did here, let's just try again. So this should be right now. And now if I say no and I go again, it's going to be 2 of these loops happening roughly at the same time, offset by the time that we did the second one from the first one. So what we want is to store this timer event that gets returned here. So let's say private timer event. It's going to be a phaser.time.timer event, and it could be undefined. And let's go this.timer event do that. Now, once we come up here, when we want to typewrite a text, if this .timer event, so if it is existing, we want to do this .timer event .destroy, so we can stop that, and then this .timer event, just set this back to undefined. And now let's see what that does. So we got our thing, we say no, press it again, and we don't have two running at the same time, conflicting with each other, writing into the same text field. So that is good. Now if I come here, okay, so now, of course, if I press space again, I actually want it to just finish immediately, like in most dialogues. If you just press the action button again while the dialogue is going, you want to just basically skip to the end and finish. So we can do that here by doing this. So in our handle interaction for our dialog box, we can actually check if there is a selected item. So in this case, we know we've asked to typewrite the text, so there should be a typewrite text going on. So what we can do is just show the entire text. So there's a couple ways we can do this, but let's just do it this way. So let's call this text to show. It'll be just do this, set it to blank string. And then when we go to typewrite text, we can also just store this .text to show as the incoming text. This is the text we want to show. And then when we get the item interaction handler callback again, and we already have a selected item, I mean, of course, we can also check for text to show as long as we also get rid of the text after this is finished, but this is just simpler to check if we have a selected item. And then we do this .text, we give it text to show, and we have to remember to this .timer event .destroy, so that we stop the typewriter effect animation, and let's just set that to undefined. So now let's come here, we select the potion, let me see all the text, and there it goes. So one thing here with that, since we're relying on to select the item now for some state, we do want to make sure that we clear it out when we say yes or no here, right? Because so if yes, you'll do whatever, then we're just going to unselect that. Just now we've already handled that item. Same thing in close. We want to just clear that out because it's no longer the selected item. And everything should still work. That should do it. If I come here, that does not work. Yes. So in that case, we went to a different item. So what we actually want, if selected item equals item. We could also check name or ID or something if in your case this item instance may be different, even though you're selecting the same thing. That may not be the case, but if it is, then you'll want to check ID or something to make sure that they're the same item. We're talking about the same item, even though the actual reference is different. So what we're doing is, if it's the same item, we know we want to stop our typewriter and just show all the text. If it's a different item, that means we're selecting something else. So let's come here. Good. Now let's go to our meet, and it'll do the thing as normal and finish that. Okay, great. Let's say no, do it again, do that, say yes, that's good. No, speed that up. Okay, so that's good. We've got that. Now let's add to our open and close a tween. So for open, we've got scene.tweens.add targets. The target will be our game object here, this .game object. So what we want to do in open is our y wants to go to this value here. So instead of setting it directly, we're going to do that. We're going to give it, let's say, a duration, but let's pass that in. We may want it to be different. and let's just say 300 milliseconds. Then ease phasor.math.easing. Let's just do sign in out. You can play with different ones for different effects. So let's see, that should at least give us an open animation. Yep, that's nice. No, close doesn't have one, so let's do one. It's basically the same here. Now instead of y going to this value, it's going to be the y value that we were setting in close. And then we need a duration here as well. And let's just say 300 milliseconds. And no, that's much nicer, isn't it? Just a little bit of animation there makes it much, much nicer. So fantastic. So that was the typewriter and adding our dialog open and closed. Now, in the spirit of components, we are going to break out our open and close logic into another component, because you can see here, there's nothing inherently specific to dialogues here. It could be anything moving from any y direction position to any y direction, really. But just for humans to think, we're going to call this a show hide component. That's what we're doing. We're showing and hiding something. So let's come here to our components folder. Let's make a new thing. We're going to call it show hide. If you have a better name, definitely use it. Let's go here, export default class show hide implements I component. And one day I'm going to find a way to have VS Code actually use single quotes instead of double quotes. And oops, that. Now, the thing coming in is some kind of game object. I do like to also import phasor, even though you don't strictly need it. It just looks nicer to me in our module system here. Okay, so let's go our game object. Now let's go private game object phasor.gameObject.gameObjects. Now we're not using container here because it doesn't really matter to us. All we really care is that it's a game object of some kind. So the lower down the inheritance chain, the more reusable your component can be, as long as the object still has the properties you need. So we have that. So now let's just copy our show hide, and we're going to make these public in our new component. Let's copy that. Let's post into here. Open. Close. And you see the code basically just works, right? There's nothing specific to dialog box in this code. But to make it a little bit more generic, we are going to also pass in, let's say, open x, open y, and we'll call this number. And then close x, number, close y. And so you can also pass in points, but we'll just do this. So open x, so this is the open, the x and y value when this component thinks you're open. And then we have close x number, private close y number. Okay. So this dot open x gets open x. This dot close x gets close x. This dot open, oh sorry, well I mean that is true, but this dot open y gets open y. This dot close y gets close y. And then here, for more generic, so this dot open x, y, this dot open y. And then for close, what we're going to have is, instead of basically specifying the exact y position for open and for close, we're going to pass it in the constructor so it's more dynamic. So I think that's good. Let's give it an empty line at the end there. So now we can go to our dialog box. Now I'll show you another way to find a component when you're using this component-based system. So we did one where you pass in a component to the constructor of another component, but there is another way, and that is by calling find. So in this init, so in our, well, It's not as useful. So let's go to here. You'll see that here, I probably may have not mentioned this yet since I've recorded some of these videos multiple times due to audio problems. But the component system is so useful in separating your code out that I just delete components and refilm the video. But what we have here in our component service is optionally in the init is to pass in a reference to our component service. So you can get that if you need it. In this case, we're going to show you how you can use it. And what you can do is call find component on our component service to find any components, add it to a game object that we pass in. So we give it a game object and then we tell it what component type that we want. So if you've used Unity before, there's, I think it is .find component as well. I think it's also on the game object or on the mono behavior when you do it, but I don't remember. Nonetheless, it's very similar to that. So let's go to our dialog box. And we're going to want to do this in awake. So there's awake in their start, and awake gets called before all the starts. And since you don't know exactly when a component is added to a game object, you want to call this in start rather, not awake, in start, so that you know that the component has already been added. So I'll show you how it doesn't work in awake later, but let's add start here. And here we want to get a reference to our show hide component from our component service. So let's go here, components, and this is going to be of I component service. And here, private components, and it's going to be I component service. Oh, not in the constructor. That was wrong. We wanted in this init. And then this dot components, components. So now we have a reference to our component service. So in start, we can do this dot components dot find component on this game object. We want the show hide component, right? So now there is more coupling here than using an interface, but it's still somewhat loose in the sense that you should handle what happens if there is no show hide component, right? So let's just do this here. Let's say private show hide component. This dot show hide, since this can return undefined, let's return any, but it may not exist. So if it's not there, it will be undefined. And then if we delete this open and close, what we would do is in the this dot close, we would do this dot show hide close, this dot show hide close, this dot show hide close, and then when we would want to open it here, this dot show hide open. And since we do have a duration, we can just say 0 so that it does it immediately when you start. And so nothing is happening here, right? So like we were saying, if this is undefined, we want to handle it, and we are using this optional chaining operator. So that means if show hide is undefined, it'll just do nothing. And that's not the best way of handling it, but at least there's no error. There's other things you can do if that is the case, but we'll let you handle that. What we need to do is actually add our show hide component on our dialog box component. So this dot components dot add component dialog box new show hide, and our open is going to be let's see, this dot scale dot height times 0.8. Close is going to be this dot scale dot height. Let's just break this out here. So that's our open XY, close XY, and we add that to our dialog box game object via our component service here. So let's save that. Now this should actually work this time. Oh no, no, well, it didn't. Let's see what happened. Okay, so let's go here. Dialog box in start, it has this. Oh, so in awake, it of course does not have that, so it won't close it. Let's see. There we go. So now there is that issue of it appearing before it, like for that split seconds, and start gets called 1 frame after awake. So we really should just start our guy here fully closed. Okay, so now when we call open, that comes up, everything still works, we say no, then it closes. And now we've taken that open and close logic out into its own show hide component that you can reuse on other things. It doesn't have to be a dialog box. It could be anything that needs to open to a certain XY and close to a certain XY with a ease or a tween animation when it does that open and close. Now, what I had mentioned about when you do find a component, and let's say you try to do find component. Let's just copy this. Let's say you try to do find component over here, right? And let's actually do the console.log this.showHide. You're going to see this will be undefined at this point. So right, that's the log for undefined, and of course nothing will happen if I want to bring up a dialog. So what's going on here is in our adding of components, they could be added in any order. Like there's no way the dialog box, or it shouldn't assume that it's going to be added after a specific component that it needs. It could be at added at any point on this game object, and it should still exist. And so in awake, it's called before start. So as each one of these components are added to your game object in this component service, awake gets called immediately. Then on the next update frame, start gets called on all those components that were added to the game object. And so that's why if you want a specific component to use in your other component, and you're going to use components.findComponent here, you should do it in start. So let's take that. So we showed you that in awake, it doesn't have it. So no code was changed except for calling it in start instead of awake. And we logged that out and it is there. And now it works. So that's still good. Bye. That works. All right, so that is the typewriter effect, the dialog open and close with animation, and maybe the most interesting part is we showed you how to break out logic that looks like it could be shared or should be shared into a separate component, and then how you can use it by using find component on the component service. So now if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like and hit subscribe for more videos using this component pattern to make games in Phaser 3.50 and other web technologies.